Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Chelsea Cousins and I am the host of your webinar today. I'm so excited to have everybody here. We have a really relatable and awesome topic that we're going to be talking about. The title of today's webinar is called Tech Wise. In this webinar, we're going to be talking about how new technology and emerging technology trends impact our donor relationships. With that, I want to introduce our speaker, Chad Williams, CEO of 5Q. But before we introduce Chad, a couple of quick housekeeping things. Number one, if you are taking notes during this webinar, that is awesome. Please know that we are recording it, and so you will get a recorded replay in your inbox later on this week. The other note is if you have any questions throughout the webinar, especially as we dive into some of these new technologies, feel free to jot those in the chat box or to put them in the Q&A section, and we will answer all questions at the end. And so with that, I would love to introduce our speaker, Chad. Chad is the CEO here at 5Q. He has been involved with technology since 1995. His company provides a full suite of software development and interactive marketing solutions, including groundbreaking personalization platform called Journity. Chad and the 5Q team serve dozens of nonprofits, including homeless shelters, national faith-based nonprofits, city and county governments, and many others. Chad, we're excited to learn from you today, and so I will go ahead and hand the mic over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chelsea. Thank you, each one of you who are here. I'm excited to share with you some of the new trends that we're seeing in technology, and specifically about how they can have a significant impact on your donor relations. So I had something happen to me earlier this year. My oldest son got married, and we were so excited for him. You can see him there in the middle of the picture there. But that really got me thinking about what times were like 27 years ago when my wife Karen and I were married. Yeah, that's our picture right there. So just look at these two pictures right here. Even this is telling about how technology has changed. Why did I have to take a picture of a picture to show you our wedding picture? Because we didn't have a digital picture of our wedding way back in 1992. So just think about that. What technology didn't exist in 1992 when my wife Karen and I got married? Think of companies like Amazon. They weren't around. Google, Facebook, the ever-present iPhone or Android, it wasn't around. Social media, even the World Wide Web did not yet exist in 1992. The game console that I grew up with was Atari, the Atari 2600, playing Pac-Man on that. And now you've got everything from Nintendo to everything else. Just think about it. $690 billion per year of revenue is being generated by companies like Amazon, Google, Facebook. If you include Apple, which was a very small company back then, 690 billion of new revenue that's being generated each year by companies that didn't even exist 27 years ago. That just shows that the world of technology is only getting faster and faster. And so for those of us that lead nonprofits, learning how to navigate in this new age, it's super, super important. And to know what to invest in and what not to invest in takes real wisdom. And so that's what we want to do today, is share with you some thoughts about how to be tech-wise. First, what does a tech-wise mindset look like? Then some trends, then share with you some resources. And then we actually have an offer that we want to give you an opportunity to participate in. Google or Amazon is launching its new Echo Show version 8, and it's going to be available in mid-November. And so we wanted to give one person who's on our webinar today the ability to get one of those. And so I'll give you more details on how you can get your own version for no cost at the end of today's webinar. So first, let's talk about the mindset of a tech-wise organization. These are the things that you need to know as you lead your organization to be effective with technology. And it really does start with the right mindset. And the first one is think of technology as outreach, not just fundraising, not just marketing, but be able to use digital to have a real impact in the audience that you serve. This can happen as simple, well, I'm not going to say as simple. This can happen in examples like take a charity water for an example. Here they are building wells around the world to people who need them. And when you log onto their website as a donor, you're not just giving money. It's not just a channel to give money. You also have the ability to engage with the specific well that you helped to build. You can see where that well is built. You can see exactly the people that is being impacted, how many people is being impacted by your fund. So real outreach is happening, not just to the people who are not just to the people who are not using the technology in Africa, but also to your donors. You're able to connect to them directly. So think of technology as outreach, not just a channel. Secondly, think of digital as relationship, which means it's not just about blasting out emails. It's about listening and engaging. So do you respond to people on Facebook and social media? Do you ask them questions to be able to engage in your audience? So think the mindset about digital as it relates to relationships is, are you building a relationship with them, or is it just a proclamation or just a blast that you want them to respond to you? The third mindset of a healthy digital mindset is to be personalized. Just think about Amazon. Everything on Amazon is tailored to you. Now think about your organization's website. Does the content change or promotions change based on who is visiting it? Or when you send emails, do you include your email's name, or are they very generic, like dear friend? So as we think about a healthy digital mindset, make sure you think, how can we personalize every interaction that we're having with our audience? Fourthly is think integrated, because technology today is integrated and ubiquitous. It touches everything, from your data entry people to your receptionist to your executive director and CEO. So think about your organization. Is the technology that we use integrated to make everyone's life easier? Or do you have a gazillion different systems and they don't even talk to each other? So again, a mindset is that the more integrated you can be, the better that you'll be and the more effective you'll be. And fifth mark of a healthy digital mindset is that just understanding that technology is dynamic. It's constantly changing. So the fact that you're on this webinar tells me that you understand this and that you have a desire to stay up with those changes. But just remember, what's working today may not be what's working tomorrow. So be prepared to change. So the 5 marks of a healthy digital mindset is, remember that it's outreach, it's relationship, it's personalized, it's integrated, and it's dynamic. This quote, Clay Shirky said, "When technology becomes boring, then it becomes technically or socially interesting." What does that mean? That basically means that most nonprofits are about 7 to 10 years behind the technological change. They're not riding on the bleeding edge. So how does a nonprofit invest at the right time without being on the bleeding edge and wasting resources? We've developed what we call the 10% rule, which means that if 10% of your audience is using a new technology, you should be adopting it. Alternately, if 10% of your audience is not using an old technology, you shouldn't have to support it anymore. Think about the way that mobile websites came about. Before their iPhone, there was a technology called WAP, or Wide Area Protocol. Those that were on, even in the nonprofit space, those that were on the bleeding edge of technology developed apps in that technology. But only a handful of people actually use those apps. And back in the day, I was a Palm Trio user. And I remember we didn't actually develop any of those WAP networks, but we had interactions with some nonprofits who did. Then, but less than 10%, I think only about 2% of the population actually ever used those types of apps. Then the iPhone came out, and now you could actually see your website on your phone. Well, kind of. The early adopters, which would be before 10% of the folks use it, they could do one of two things. They could either build an app that would communicate in a way that take advantage of some of the features, or they would build a completely separate mobile-friendly website. And honestly, the app may or may not have been a good fit for that organization. That's a completely different conversation. But if had you waited until 10% of your website audience were visiting your website from a mobile device, at that point, there was new technology called a responsive website was available. So then you would have only had to build your site one time, and it looks both on both mobile and desktop. So that's just a quick example of how using a 10% rule can save you from investing in technology too soon. Just as a side note, if your site isn't responsive, you do need to update it just as soon as you can. So bottom line, use the 10% rule to help guide your technology investments. Now let's get to some actual tech-wise trends, now that you have some principles around a good mindset. First, just thinking about security and privacy. Just this month, the food delivery startup DoorDash announced that they had a data breach. They lost 4.9 million people, or 4.9 million people had their information compromised. We hear that more and more, and we're only going to hear about it more and more as we move forward. Even if you're using the most up-to-date technology, you can't 100% mitigate the risk that somebody's going to break in and steal the data that you have. But there are some things that you can do to mitigate that risk, even though you can't eliminate it. One is make sure that you're using a modern CRM or constituent relationship management software. Just one example would be like Virtuous CRM. Some of the older ones, they have very potential to have security holes in them. Next thing, think about your website. Make sure that your plugins for your website are always up to date, especially if you're using a website framework that lots of people are using, such as WordPress. And we love WordPress. A lot of the customers that we work with, we build WordPress sites for them. And so just make sure that your website plugins are up to date. And then there are also a lot of providers today, such as what we do at 5Q, can provide an extra layer of security around websites. So make sure your website plugins are up to date. And thirdly, if you are doing any kind of work overseas, specifically in the European Union, there's something called GDPR, which is the Global Data Protection Regulations. Those were actually released last May. And we actually wrote a guide on how a nonprofit can be GDPR compliant. And so I'll share more with you in the resources area. The other important thing about GDPR is that even though that is technically just for those that operate in the Eastern Europe in Europe have to apply by, I really think within the next 2 to 5 years, you're going to see the same kind of guidelines come into play, and that we're already starting to see some of those guidelines come into play in actual regulation and laws in the United States. So it's good just to understand what some of those guidelines are. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. I want you to think with me. Let's say that you're a medical services nonprofit and you're serving around the globe. Every day, your efforts are saving real people's lives. Okay, so you're back in the States, you have a major donor presentation that you're meeting with a couple. They're in the Denver, Colorado area. So she's a retired doctor, and as a couple, they have a capacity to be a major contributor. So you walk in, you exchange pleasantries, and then you say, come with me. Let me just share with you what you're doing. But instead of taking out a ticket, you actually pull out of your backpack or briefcase, you pull out a pair of VR goggles, a pair of them. You give one to him, one to her, and immediately they're transported overseas. They can see the working conditions. They can see the real needs of the people that they're serving. They can see the real joy on the faces when they receive the treatment. Then the couple, they take off their glasses, they look at each other, and they look at you and say, wow, the work you're doing is tremendous. How can I help? That's just a picture of of what we're going to are already seeing with the area of virtual and augmented reality. Charity Water actually began using VR in 2006, and as with all technology, the price to develop VR and VR presentation is going to continue to drop. So my encouragement to you is right now, be creating those videos for your website that communicate well with your audience, but be ready to invest in VR when it comes down, whether you're a small organization or a large organization, you'll be able to invest earlier. Be ready to invest into VR, especially to help with your major donor development prospects. Next, we're going to talk about voice user interface, or VUI. What is voice user interface? What is VUI? Think about Alexa, think about Google Home, and think about all the different ways that these voice user interface devices are controlling all areas of the house today. Remember the guideline, the mindset guideline I mentioned earlier about the 10% rule? Well, right now, over 26 people in the United States own a smart speaker like Alexa. You can see the statistics of what the breakdown is between Echo and Google Home. Well, why is this important for a nonprofit? Well, first of all, we don't know everything that the technology is going to do now or in the future, but because over 1/4 of the population already have one, keep your eye on what could be. But also, does your organization have a podcast? If so, is it available on Amazon Alexa? If it isn't, it should be. Speaking of podcasts, if you don't have a podcast, you really should consider one, because that can really help foster connecting with your audience. We actually did an entire webinar on podcasting last month. So if you want a link to that, just drop a note to the moderator or drop a note in the chat box, and we'd be more than happy to send you a link to where you can get a copy of last month's webinar on podcasting for nonprofits. The next trend we're going to look at is personalization and customization. Okay, so I have a confession about one of my hobbies. Okay, I like to hunt. And specifically, I like to hunt deer and pheasant here in the Midwest where I live. So I visit websites that help me be a better land manager and help me produce do the things I need to keep the game healthy. And so there's a specific hunting nonprofit website that I visit often. But every time that I visit, a pop-up appears asking me to sign up for their email newsletter. Okay, I signed up for the newsletter months ago. I get their email every week or whenever, but I still get that pop-up. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem isn't the pop-up technology. The technology works. Those of us that are marketers, we know it works to increase our subscribers. But the way that we're using the technology can be extremely annoying. Well, today we have the ability to be able to only show messages to people when they are ready to communicate or ready to receive them. So once I've signed up for their email list, there's no reason that I should be getting pop-ups or messages asking me to sign up again. The for-profit space knows this. They also know that when they're able to communicate in a personalized and customized way, they see revenue grow. I think Amazon has said that over 30% of their revenue they can tie back to their personalization engine. Also, you can see some of the stats there that users actually prefer personalization when it's relevant to what they're doing. So what about the nonprofit space? Customizing your messaging based on who's visiting should be something that every website is doing. It really does work. We've actually worked with many organizations who have used personalization. Here's just one example where they increased their monthly donors by 48%. And at 5Q, we've actually developed a product that is built specifically to help nonprofits personalize and customize their messages to the people that are coming. You need it for your year-end fundraising, and you need it to be able to help engage those users that are coming to you on a regular basis. And we actually offer a free version of the software. And also, I'll tip my hand a little bit. For this webinar only, we're going to share how you can win an Echo Show when you use the free version of Journity. And I'll share more about that at the end of this presentation. But whether you're using Journity or some other solution, being able to personalize your messaging, being able to customize the messaging based on the people that are coming to your website, based on the people that have signed up for your email list is hugely, hugely important to be digitally effective, whether it's donations and fundraising or just general communication with your audiences. The next tech trend that we hear a lot about right now is artificial intelligence, or big data is another aspect of AI or artificial intelligence. It's going to radically change who and how we interact with people. Lots of things in the nonprofit space even are already being promised. Some of it is actually starting to be delivered. Some of it isn't, but some of it is. I really do think AI is going to have a huge impact on how we connect with our donors in the future. I'm going to mention two organizations that, from my view, are leading the way with some of the things that are going on in AI, and so just encourage you to have your eyes on them. One is Masterworks. They're an agency that works with nonprofits, and specifically Christian-based nonprofits in the fundraising area. They've built an AI system called Epiphany. It'll take information from multiple sources, lots of different sources, not just your CRM database, but a lot of other different sources. It'll scrub the data. Then it will build several data models and how that data can be used in direct mail acquisition, digital advertising buys, and other means like that. Specifically, they're using that data to be able to reach out to other like-minded donors and to be able to ask them to engage with the ministries that they're serving. So keep an eye on Masterworks and the product they have called Epiphany. Another one, Virtuous CRM. Virtuous automatically, as your CRM, it automatically ties the information that you have available to your donor directly to things like their social footprint or their wealth engine score or lots of other data points out there. So, and there's probably other CRM tools that do something similar, but my point is, with big data, with artificial intelligence, it's going to become easier and easier to connect with the specific audiences that you want to connect with. So a lot of the things that you're going to be seeing in AI are going to be happening behind the scenes. They may talk about it in their promotionals, but just make sure that you're keeping up with some of the changes that are happening in artificial intelligence. Next topic we're going to talk about is big tech censorship. What does that mean? So at 5Q, we purchase advertising and we manage Google Grant advertising campaigns on behalf of our customers. And one of the trends we're seeing is that tech companies are really dictating which audiences we can and cannot connect with. What does that mean? So this is Facebook. They actually require additional verification to run ads on, quote, issues of national importance. Well, what are issues of national importance? Things like abortion, or if you're advertising things about even poverty, or the very specific values. So again, they're tightening down on the areas that you can actually pay advertising for. Or Google, they no longer allow custom audiences relevant to religious beliefs. So if you try to target a specific audience, like a church denomination, you can't even run those kinds of campaigns. So what do you do about that? Well, one thing, just be aware that that's a trend. So don't be surprised if you try to run some campaigns in Google or Facebook, or some of the big tech companies aren't going to allow you to do that. And then be prepared to rechannel or redirect some of your advertising dollars. Maybe work out partnerships with other organizations that you know have the audience that you're trying to seek. but just be prepared to rechannel some of your advertising dollars. Last, as far as trends, I just wanted to mention cryptocurrency. What is cryptocurrency? So most currencies is tied to a nation's banking system. In the United States, it's a central bank. Well, cryptocurrency, it's based on computer algorithms. So think Bitcoin. You buy a block of Bitcoin, and then you can use your Bitcoins to purchase additional merchandise. Well, why is that important for a nonprofit? I really think that keep an eye on Facebook's cryptocurrency efforts. It's called Libra. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't heard of it. Why is that important? Well, how many active users does Facebook have? They have over 2.3 billion active users. How many people live in the United States? There's only 327 people that live in the United States. So basically, if Facebook were a country, it'd be the largest country in the world almost twice over. So if they successfully launch a currency, and they do have lots of hurdles to jump through, even in this last week, I've heard the government is really looking at some different things about it. But if they're able to pull this off, just imagine if you live in a country that doesn't have a stable currency and it's racked by inflation. Well, why wouldn't you use an alternate option like Libra, especially if all your friends and businesses are already on Facebook? So what is that for you? So for today, make sure that you're able to accept all the modern payment methods, credit card, PayPal, even some of the new ones like Venmo, Apple Pay, Google Pay, all those. But then tomorrow, be ready to accept payments from new currencies like Libra, Bitcoin, and some of the others. So those are some of the trends. In terms of resources, just want to share with you. Ones I mentioned earlier, our guide to GDPR, the Global Data Privacy Act from the Eastern Europe. You can get that at that, you can download that right there. Another book, and this is more on the personal side, but a book that's been really helpful for myself is we still have some kids at home. It's called The TechWise Family, and it's helped us give a framework for how do we, in a wise way, help our kids embrace technology, but also not to the exclusion of relationships. And then third, I'll mention Mary Meeker. She's she releases a internet trends report every year. I faithfully follow her report every year when she releases that. Also, remember the smart young team members that you have on your team. They're living and breathing this technology every day. Tap them, use their ideas, and see how you can continue to use technology to reach the next generation. Okay, real quick, want to mention our offer. We are giving away a Echo Show, the version 8 that's being released. Echo, or you can Google it, Amazon releasing it in November. So really the two things that you need to do. First, go to Journity.com and click on pricing, sign up for the free version of Journity, and then install it on your website by next Monday. And that's all you have to do, and you'll automatically be entered into the drawing for the Echo Show. Then on November 1st, by November 1st, we'll notify the person of their winner, whoever the winner is. And then as soon as Amazon has it released, it'll be shipped directly there. So we'd love to have you participate. We'd love to have you give Journity to be able to use Journity to more effectively raise funds, personalizing those interactions as they come to your website, especially as we're heading into the giving season, end of year. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Chelsea for any questions.
Hey, Chad, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for hanging with us here through this webinar. Now we're going to open it up for questions. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat box now or in the Q&A section. Chad, to get us started, I have a couple questions here for you. The first one is, can you please share where the podcast information for nonprofits will be located, or where they can find that on our website?
You know, I don't know the answer to that right now, honestly. But if you can give your email address directly in the chat box, just a private message to Chelsea, and we'll be sure to give that to you just as soon as we have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be located on our blog. Jackie, you're the one who asked that question, so we'll make sure and connect with you and get that information over to you. It was a great webinar with a lot of great statistics
Yeah, it
and
was.
information that's helpful for anybody who's considering starting a podcast. Okay, next question for you, Chad, is do you know the cost and setup of virtual reality, or what kind of tech you have to have in place to make that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't give you details. But I can tell you we've bid on and priced out a couple different projects, and right now it's running north of $15,000 because it's not just about the VR software, but you have to go out and you have to shoot the videos, the right videos from several different angles, integrate all those together to be able to do that. So um, again, if you are wanting to learn more about that, I can give you a resource, a couple associated organizations that have done VR, and I'd be happy to share those with you offline, and you can explore that more in detail. But right now, it is going to typically run more than $15,000. But it's like anything in technology, as it becomes standardized, as what they're building now is all custom, when it starts hitting the point where we're able to just have products that are just focused on VR, those prices will come down in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chad. We have another great question coming in from a participant. Our biggest difficulty is finding staff that have the capabilities to implement these technologies. Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think there's a certain sense for every organization, not just nonprofits, but every organization has challenges with that. So I'm going to recommend three sources, three ways to think about that. One is, depending on your organization, look for volunteers. Like if you work in a setting and you rub into shoulders for people in the for-profit sector, that they're really an expert in that area, and if they have a passion for what you do, just say, hey, can you help us out with this? So first is to look for volunteers. Second, when it comes to recruiting, I'll just share where we're getting actually some pretty good success in hiring some getting good applicants that fit not just our technology need, but also our can connect with you with what we do. And that honestly, that's LinkedIn. And outside of our personal network, LinkedIn has been the probably the most effective way in the last 6 months for recruiting qualified people for our organization. And thirdly, I'd highly recommend you consider partnering with an organization that has the ability to help you implement or to guide you along those implementations. Organizations, honestly, like 5Q or like others, some of the organizations we worked with, we started working with, I can think of one, I'll just name it, Revive Our Hearts. Started working with them 15 years ago, within a year after we started. And at that point, we were their web department. We were their web team. And over the years, that ministry has grown. They're a multi-million-dollar organization right now. And we've essentially worked ourselves out of a job. We still do work for them, but they've hired staff. They have a director of their digital, and they have designers and programmers on team. So we still come alongside and we help them from a direction standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, but they're at the point where they can bring in their own staff. So identifying a company that can start with where you're at right now and paint a picture where they can grow as your organization grows.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. And one last question. If I can only implement one kind of technology to start, what do you recommend?
Man, that's a tough one. And the reason why it's tough is because I'd have to ask you a question, and that is, what is the technology that you're currently using right now? So in other words, if you don't have a website, I hope you have a website, but if you don't have a website, the first thing you should do is build a website. If you have a website, but you don't have email, the next thing you should do is build up an effective email list, an effective email following. Because that's still, even though it feels like an old technology, email is still your most effective way when it comes to communication and fundraising. Then thirdly, if you already have an email in place, Then look at your social media and look at your social media outreaches. Are you engaging well with your social media spaces? And once you have those three things, then start adding personalization. So when people come to your website, are you able to personalize the interactions that are coming with you? So those would be the areas that I would focus on first. And again, what's going to be most important, if you have other specific questions, I'd be more than happy to just do a conversation and hear where you're at right now, and give you some feedback or insight on what I might recommend based on your specific situation. So just drop a note to Chelsea, and I'd be happy to reach out to you on that. Or send me, you can see my email right there. Just send me an email or text. I'd be happy to talk to you directly.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. And with that, those are all the questions we have right now. Feel free, anybody who's on the webinar, to email Chad directly if you have any questions that he can answer regarding to the content he shared today. If you didn't get a chance to get them answered here now, or if you have questions that you think of later on throughout the day or the week, please email Chad directly, and he will do his best to get back to you with a solid answer. With that, Chad, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you and let you wrap it up and close out today's webinar.
Thanks again, Chelsea. Great questions that you folks are asking today. I just want to remind you, feel free to go to Journity.com, click on the pricing, and sign up for Journity, get it installed on your website by Monday, and you'll be registered to win a Echo Show when Amazon releases that in the middle of November. So again, thanks everybody. And if you have any specific things, feel free to reach out to us directly. Bye.